Hi everybody, Brian here from quantlabs.net, streaming here on good old Facebook and good old YouTube. Eventually, it'll make its way over there. Okay, so just for the nerds out there, this is not really anything to do with trading. This is more to do with message queuing. If you're familiar with publisher subscriber pattern, I'm going to talk about it and just my overall frustration with it. Go to my blog. I've tried looking at PubNub, which is pretty good, but it's a bureaucratic machine. I can go into that in more detail. I've got a blog post here at quantlabs.net/blog. I put up a few hours ago using Google Cloud PubSub with Python. Well, I thought it was easy, looked pretty good, and then I get this weird exception about credentials. And I'm going to be honest with you, when I looked at it and tell me where to go, I just said, this is too complicated for me compared to PubNub. It was just way easier. So I kind of abandoned it. I'm just amazed at Google, the morons that they are, to develop this kind of setup for the Google Cloud PubSub. I don't know why. I mean, I got it running within probably 2 hours with PubNub. Much better. So then I thought, okay, let's try out Amazon AWS SQS, which is queuing as well. So here I thought, okay, I got 2.1 million requests per month, total cost 84 cents for the month. Oh, wow, that's pretty cheap. So then I started implementing it, and again, morons again over at AWS. Now, I could be wrong, but from the get-go, it's easy to set up, but part of the problem is when you have your client, which is going to be public, I mean, it's a um, publicly released script. They want the client to provide the AWS credentials. So for a customer, they're going to get my AWS credentials. Now I don't know if there's a way to get around that, but it was not easy to find an answer to. It was just again bureaucratic bullshit. Uh, both with Google and all their friggin' uh, options. It was just trash. It was just so bloated garbage that it's no different than Microsoft. I didn't even bother looking at Azure. I don't see how it's any different. But I will say PubSub did make it a lot easier. So let's go back into this. So in terms of PubSub, it's a commercial product. The response for the technical tickets are really good. Like it's really responsive. So today I set up, well, how much am I going to pay for this? So a little girl schedules it. She's supposed to be a sales representative. Clearly did not read the use cases, the requirements, and she's supposed to be working at some technical company and just did it on the fly. And I'm having to provide her the same answers that I would expect her to be able to go into this thing and be prepared with a 15-minute time allotment to get me a solution. So when it came to the solution, she didn't know, so she was useless. But I've scheduled another call for tomorrow afternoon with somebody more senior, which should have been done right out of the get-go. I mean, it's a simple solution. I give as much detail with this. So again, it comes back to the bureaucratic machine on the sales front at PubNub. So lucky for me, I found a really good solution. So I've been playing around with Flask, as you know, over the last couple of weeks. I really like Flask. It's lightweight. I wouldn't touch the other one, the Django from Python. All the other web technologies, like the front end, just all haywire and just a complete mess. So I found this solution. Let's get into it because I'm sure you wanna see this. So let's check it out. If you go over to GitHub, namely, actually here, this is what I started here first. So here with Subpub, you have to understand if you want to build in tolerance and redundancy, that's what you pay for. That's to enable you. If people cannot get messages, then well, they're not going to get the message unless you go with a commercial solution. But usually, for my testing, it's usually pretty good if it's on Flask. Okay, Flask has been pretty solid. I mean, I've looked at ZeroMQ, kind of useless, which is open source, and Redis, which can be good, but it's just not dependable either for PubSub or sorry for any form of message queuing, sadly to say. So I came across this project with Flask. I feel pretty good about it. Here's the source code. This is what I like about these kind of descriptions. This guy, Max Halford, has done a bang up job on this. Just awesome. So here, what we do, quite simply, we set up a Flask server. I'm assuming you know how to do all the basics here. You put everything. He puts everything into a virtual Python environment, which I'll show in the demo. And in here, in the queuing, he has this message queue enabler, or whatever you want to call it. But down here, there's a special format you got to follow. Now, I'm going to put the links into my blog post so you'll be able to get it better. And then you send out a ping message with an an endpoint for ping with a responsive Pong. Very simple. But understand, in the emitting part, it's emits a message, the ping message every second. So it's not true PubSub, but it does it every second. So I think that's good enough. And here you have to set up your Flask server environment. And let me just go into the GitHub. So here's the GitHub. There's three elements. We have the app, which is the Flask server, the emitter, and the listen. So in here, he walks you through how to set up everything, every step of the way. So you run each of these in three different terminals. You set up your virtual environment for the Python, and then you set up the Flask server. Then you set up a second terminal session to listen, and then you send another one for the emitter. Okay, it's real simple. So here it is. Okay, so here is our web server. Okay, this is the Flask server. So every second, it's sending out that message. Okay, so nothing's getting sent out. So if I go over to my Flask server, for those that might not know, yeah, it's just a hello message. It's a default Flask. One thing I will say about Flask is, you want to use what they call a WSGI server. One that I've been looking at is one called Waitress. Now, in here in the blog, this guy does talk about it. Here he is using Junicorn, I think he's talking about. Yeah, so he's talking about using this WSGI server in Junicorn. So do take note of that if you run into some weird problems because of a single server lock or multi-threaded. Gee, I'm sounding like no expert here, but anyways, here we have the Pong message. Here's the emitter. So all this is doing is sending out the Pong messages. We have 3 listeners. Okay, so for me, I have my ways to validate people on the client side. That's all done again through Flask. Server side, that validates them. Other than that, it's fast. It's very fast. They get the Pong every second, or the sending out. It's kind of like a heartbeat, I guess you could call it. And then let's look at the code. So in the GitHub here, first we have the Flask server. And again, like when I say it's simple, it's simple. But again, as I said here, this is a very severe limitations. Okay, the one thing, there's no dependency. So if you're using something called Flask SSE, server-side event, you need to use Redis, the database, the NoSQL database, as a dependency. Here, as you can see, the point of this is that, as the article says in the title, you can send somewhat a Flask server event with no extra dependencies. That's the key of it. That's the whole point of it. But this is quite smart. So again, in the code here, here's our code for the Flask server. Very simple. Here's our endpoint on the listener as well, and it will send out the ping and then you get the response message sent back to your listener. Okay, so you could, with Flask, put in your code to be received in HTML or JavaScript. Fine. You could also do the same thing um, with Python as well, and that's what I do. I use a curl statement to access the Flask server on my server, and then from there it will, as I said, it'll validate and then send back a JSON object. So this works pretty good. It's pretty straightforward. One thing I love about, like, I cannot tell you how easy it is to do this in under 70 lines, and just on the web, the Flask server itself. That's pretty impressive for an endpoint. My Flask server code is less than, with this now, maybe less than 400 lines of code. Trying to do this in Java, I just talked to somebody about trying to do the equivalent in Java. It took them months. But I mean, they built in the fault tolerance and whatnot. But I mean, who's got time to spin your wheels on stuff like that? Anyways, so let's go to our next piece of code. So let's look at the emitter. So again, this is on the server side. So here, all this does, it just sends out the message to here, sleeps for a second, and then it will send out that message to each listener. Again, this is all in Python, 100% Python. So here we have our listener. Simple. You call out your main function or define it. You have your endpoint defined here, and you just, for every message hitting that server, print back the response, which is the pong. And that's all we have. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's not hard with the redundancy as well. So I just wanted to show that. Pretty impressed with it. And thanks for watching. We shall talk to you later. Have a good day.